Hello, hope you guys are doing well. Today is a review of W Edinburgh in, I'll let you guess where, Edinburgh. I'm not going to bore you with a long introduction, so let's jump straight into check-in and the room. Check-in was pretty good. As you can see in the reception area, if you're waiting around, they have some books on the table, so that'll keep you occupied. For us, however, check-in didn't take too long, so let's head up to the room. So the first thing on your right is a cabinet which holds the ironing stuff, so your ironing board and iron. And then the next thing you'll see are the different sized coffee cups, so if you want an espresso or a different type of coffee, you can use different coffee cups for that. Speaking of coffee, there were 3 different types of coffee. You had a black capsule, a blue capsule and a red capsule. You can see on the menu here what each of those mean. Now it's all well and good having these coffee pods, but the machine wasn't very good, unfortunately. One person staying in a different room said that the coffee machine worked fine. It seems to be out the middle of the bunch because ours sort of just dripped a bit and splashed everywhere. But we didn't really end up with coffee, end up with more like a syrup at the bottom, and that's after pressing the button 3 times for a large cup. If I pressed it anymore, I get the feeling it was going to explode like the other guy said. So I ended up just boiling the kettle and adding a little bit to dilute it down. Don't worry if you're not much of a coffee drinker, because I do have a selection of tea. So there should be some Assam tea, some mountain green, some peppermint and some Earl Grey. You can pause it to see what those are. However, it wasn't really consistently replenished. Sometimes when we were busy, we would just take the tea bag because we didn't have time to make it in the room, and we'd just take it on the go. However, I think it's because they couldn't see the tea bag in the room that they decided not to replenish it. At least that's what we think happened. Similar thing happened with the vanity kit. We took it on the go because we couldn't use it in the room. We had to get on with our day, and again it wasn't replenished. Luckily there was a second vanity kit we could use. As you might be able to tell, we didn't spend a lot of time in the hotel. We were only really there to sleep. Anyway, moving on from all of that, you might be able to notice that there's actually different types of hangers there. Don't really normally see this. Look like there's even one for your dinner jacket. I think I only really noticed it this time because it was an open wardrobe. Again, you can see that robe there. We didn't actually use a robe. Did look quite comfy though. As you head further into the room, you can see there's a sofa there and some books on the table. One of them was about Scottish architecture, which did sound quite interesting. The architecture book was called The Story of Scottish Design, just in case you're interested. And the other one was called The Secret Life of Tartan, which is a type of cloth from the Scottish Highlands. As I mentioned previously, didn't spend a lot of time in the room, so didn't get a chance to actually read those. Did sound quite interesting, however. There is a TV in the room, and it's conveniently placed if you want to watch it from the sofa. However, if you want to just watch the TV while lying in your bed to try and help you sleep, you kind of have to swivel around. It's in the wrong position for that. There was no swivel bracket from what we could see for the TV as well. Might be able to see in the dark there. There is a telephone and a wireless charging point bedside as well. While on the topic for the bed, it was pretty comfy from what we felt. It was okay. The pillows were quite fluffy as well. There's a little panel by the bed, so if you're lazy like me and don't want to get up, you can always sort your lighting out by the bed. There's not individual switches for each light, but instead different modes. You had a work mode, which was looked like full lights on. You had a welcome one, which was still pretty bright. I'm not sure. I think there was a slight difference with that. There was a mood, which was a bit more mellow. There was a sleep mode, which was, I think, only the underbed lights. And then you had all off. You also had your do not disturb button there as well. One thing we did notice while trying to sleep is that the fridge was quite noisy. We noticed it seemed to get quite warm in the room, possibly because of the fridge kicking out heat. So we turned the AC on, which adds a little bit of background noise, but also leaves you feeling dehydrated. While we're on the topic of hydration, there is complimentary water given to you in the room. And as you can see, there's a range of different glasses you can use. You had some tumblers, cocktail glasses, and a strainer, I think, if you're going to try and make a cocktail. Also, there was some strange moss feature right next to all of that. Maybe a plant would have been nicer. There is also a mini bar. I didn't find a menu for the mini bar. However, just above that there was like a secret drawer, and there was a menu for the stuff in that drawer. It was a bunch of snacks. I'll let you make your own decisions about these prices. I mean, if you're happy to pay £4 and eat a Mars bar, if you're really craving it that much, go ahead. Anyway, enough about all of that lot. Let's move on to the bathroom. The toilet was pretty bog standard, pun intended there, sorry. The shower was pretty nice. There were two different types. You had the rainfall shower and the handheld one. The controls for it were pretty simple. The only piece of advice I would give you is that when you switch over from one to the other, it might be cold for a couple of seconds. As you might be able to tell, there are lots of mirrors in and around the room. I think that's actually to give the illusion that the room is a lot more spacious. It does feel a lot more spacious if you look at the... that's some of the stuff you get with the bathroom. You've got two toothbrushes there, don't know why they give you two. Shower cap, vanity kit. The two bottles there are mouthwash, and the two little squeezy things are toothpaste. Now, once you've settled in your room and you want to go to sleep, they do have something called a Turndown service, which I'll show you now.
Okay, just got back from work today, and it looks like there's something a little bit different. There's a little mat here, and you probably can't see that, but it says "Good night" on there, just about. You can maybe pick that up. Put a bottle of water and the glass by my bedside today. Very nice and done, and they've left me a little treat. So I'd be missing out on that every day.
The Turndown service was a little bit inconsistent. Some people said they had a knock on the door asking if they wanted Turndown service. We didn't get a knock on the door. The Turndown service was done while we were out. We only got it a couple of days out of our entire stay. Some people got it more often. They also reported that they received slippers on the mat, and we only received a shortbread on one of the occasions. So I'm not quite sure what the food criteria of Turndown service is. But it was a nice touch. So if you get a knock on the door offering Turndown service, just make sure you don't turn it down. Finally, let's talk about the view from the room. It's quite a nice view here, and you can see down there is the gym, which is open 24 hours a day. However, I'll give a brief mention to all the other facilities towards the end of the video. So I think that pretty much sums up for the room. It was a small room, but it felt spacious because of the mirrors, as I mentioned previously. Felt quite modern as well. If you want to hear about the in-room dining, join me in part 2 for the food section. So first things first, in the food section I'm going to talk about the in-room dining. What you've seen here is the breakfast menu for in-room dining. Unfortunately couldn't find the rest of the menu. For the in-room dining, obviously you've got the charge plus a service charge for the actual in-room dining, and then they might expect a tip on top of that. For example, someone ordered a soup, a glass of orange juice and a cake. So for the cost of the food itself, it was about 30 quid. However, once all of the charges and service charges have been added on top of that, it came to around £40. And then there's an optional tip. So hopefully that gives you an idea of what to expect for in-room dining. We didn't really dine at the restaurants at the hotel, however we did have breakfast every day, which is situated on the 10th floor. It's also where the sushi samba is. They also have a W lounge, which is I think top floor, and they've got another Brazilian bar as well. Hopefully you can see the breakfast menu here. You had unlimited continental food and one hot dish for £25. All in all, the food was pretty good. The staff serving us were really helpful and polite, and most of the time they went over and beyond and worked hard to make our experience amazing. So what you're seeing here is a rabanada, which is like a Brazilian French toast with some cream. This is the homemade granola with yogurt and a raspberry compote at the bottom. That's the fruit bowl on the left with a nice fruity sorbet on top and a lovely glass of coffee. This is the banana bread. The dish comes with bacon. As a vegetarian, I asked if they could do it without the bacon. The staff asked if I'd like to swap it out with something else, and suggested perhaps the scrambled eggs, which sounded nice, so that's what you see there on the side dish. And finally there we have the avocado and poached eggs. Normally I try and fit the view in with the rest of the room, however it was so good I think it needs its own special mention. This is the view from the 10th floor balcony, which was shut in the morning due to high wind. However, once the wind died down, they opened up for us, which was quite nice. I'm going to try not to talk too much in this section and let you guys just enjoy the view. They also have a rooftop called the W deck. Unfortunately, we only got to go there during the night time. I did want to get to it in the daylight, however, it was mostly shut again due to high winds. So in terms of where the hotel is situated in the local area, it is slap bang in the middle of Edinburgh. It's a brilliant location. Here you can see what it looks like when I search food in Google Maps. You can see there's lots of choice available. If you fancy some pub grub, Conan Door is just around the corner. One of the places we ate at was called 20 Princess Street. I'll show you on the map now and I'll show you some pictures of it. The food there was quite nice. We also visited Gordon Ramsay's Bread Street kitchen, which is about a 10-minute walk away. Just wanted to mention a couple of things about this restaurant. You have to read all the items on the menu to pick out what's vegetarian, because there's no indications on the menu to tell you that. There were 2 options for the starter that were vegetarian and 2 options for the main. Unfortunately, they didn't have the starter I wanted or the main I wanted. In fact, she was going to get me a drink on the house for the fact that they didn't have any of the dishes I wanted. She got me the drink all right, but she also charged for it as well. And when I asked the host what she'd recommend for a vegetarian starter, she said the mushroom velouté was good and the umami wings were good. Last time I checked, wings were not vegetarian. I think she was just nervous because she said it was her second day. Anyway, nothing wrong with the food, but there were a couple of other issues. I'm not quite sure it's what Gordon Ramsay would want from one of his restaurants. As it turns out, there's also another Gordon Ramsay restaurant just behind the hotel called Street Burger. If these don't quite fit your bill, there's plenty of options around. There's Edinburgh street food, which is a great place for lunch. I definitely saw a Nando's nearby, and the side streets around George Street have plenty of options too. So to conclude, I'll quickly just run through the other facilities at the hotel, one of them being the gym, which I mentioned previously, open 24 hours and free to use for people staying at the hotel. Unfortunately, that's one of the only things that's free to use at the hotel. They also do have a spa, and also mentioned previously, they do have a couple restaurants. A quick tip for those of you looking to try to get to the airport from this hotel, my advice would be to not take a cab but instead take a tram. It costs £7.50 and it takes you through all the scenic areas around Edinburgh, because it takes you down Princess Street, I believe. Well, so I think that covers basically everything I wanted to for W Edinburgh. I hope you've enjoyed the video, hope you found it informative, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.